want to talk a little bit more about ADDF
Mhm.
and what it's supporting. As you know, the bulk of our audience are biotech
Mhm.
execs and CEOs, many of whom founders, many of whom work in the Alzheimer's space. You guys support the advance of both diagnostics and
Mhm.
therapeutics.
So yeah, we're involved in diagnostics, therapeutics, and prevention. So those are really our three pillars. And in the therapeutic space, we are investing in companies that are developing drugs based on the biology of aging. So drugs that will treat the underlying diseases of aging with the idea that if we can treat that, then we can ultimately reduce Alzheimer's, because Alzheimer's ultimately is a disease of aging.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided about 10 years ago not to focus on amyloid, which is what these new drugs are, because pharma was focusing on amyloid and pouring tons of money into it. So we wanted to invest where we thought that our money would be more useful in novel ideas. And as it turns out, where the science has moved now is towards the biology of aging, because these amyloid drugs are, shown they reduce amyloid, but I still think the jury's out as to how effective. Maybe they'll slow cognitive decline by 30%, but that's not enough. And we think that a lot of these other ideas are going to come to fruition. And ultimately, it's going to be a combination therapy or precision medicine that is going to cure Alzheimer's, much in the way the cancer space does it with their immunotherapy. So we really taken, my CEO likes to say shots on goal.
Yeah.
And we've taken a lot of shots on goal. And our co-founder and chief science officer is an absolute, we call him the truffle hound, because he just seems to be able to seek out the most interesting biotech companies. And we've done quite well with some of them. We invested early on in a program that was licensed by Avid Pharmaceuticals, and then the company was bought by Eli Lilly, and it was the first PET scan to actually be able to identify amyloid, because before that, there was no way to really tell if you had Alzheimer's, except for either cognitive interview, which doesn't, that's not very scientific,
right,
or else an autopsy after death. So that was one of the things that we invested in early on, as well as blood tests for the diagnosis. And I think now with these anti-amyloid drugs, there's going to be a need to figure out who has Alzheimer's in an easier way than the PET scan. And I think a lot of blood tests are being developed now, some already marketed. So that's diagnostics as well. And that's the diagnostics part of the business. And there we have $100 million that was donated to us from Bill Gates and other philanthropists, Leonard Lauder. And we are using that money to try to accelerate the detection and diagnosis of Alzheimer's, with the thought that the earlier you can detect it, the better off you're going to be, and the more probable that you could get a treatment that would work.
Yeah.
And we have invested in therapeutics this year, 34 million. We'll invest 45 million next year. And then we have the diagnostics accelerator money to invest. But our biomarker team and our therapeutics team are, talk all the time and are completely sort of married at the hip, because the two really go together.
Yeah, yeah. Is the truffle hunting more difficult on the therapeutic side than it is on the diagnostic side?
Yeah, it's different. And I think therapeutics take a lot longer to come to market, so you have to wait longer. But I think the returns are ultimately better in the end. So I think if somebody comes up with the therapeutic for Alzheimer's that really works, that's gonna make a lot more money than the diagnostic test that told you that a person would have Alzheimer's. But I do think that it's quicker to market the diagnostic tools, and it's absolutely essential. If you think about it, like imagine if we didn't have a way to tell whether you have high blood pressure.
Right.
And with it really helps in the clinical trials, because they used to do clinical trials and a quarter of the people wouldn't even have Alzheimer's because there was no way to really know. They just guessed. So it's very important when you're doing the clinical trials, and also when you're measuring the endpoint to see if your therapy is effective, to have a good biomarker to be able to actually know whether your drug is doing the appropriate work.
Sure. And as those drugs become more precision, presumably, those diagnostic tools are going to be key, because precision drugs and their correlation to stage of diagnosis are, they've got to work hand in hand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is why the Diagnostics Accelerator is trying to fund, novel biomarkers. So there might be a biomarker for inflammation, for vascular disease, because these things are other aspects of Alzheimer's that people have and will ultimately need to be measured.
So speaking of the therapeutic focus, do you have any favorite horses in the race in terms of modalities?
Yes. So as I said, we invest in companies that are focused on the biology of aging. And in terms of the stage that we're interested in, it's typically now the IND enabling stage or proof of concept, phase 1 proof of concept trials, and then early phase 2, because that's where our money is going to be the most meaningful. Then later for the phase 3 trials, they're going to need hundreds of millions of dollars. And we don't have that money. So we're trying to invest in ideas that ultimately can raise future money from the VCs and from pharma, and be able to continue on after our donations done. But we do give a lot of follow-on donations as well.
When you first survey opportunities or entertain opportunities, as well, let me stop there and focus there for a minute. Like, are you typically hunting, or are you typically being courted, or is it a combination of the two?
It's a combination of both. So we are always looking for areas of our portfolio of investments where maybe we're lacking, like, maybe, here's an idea where we don't have any drugs being tested for this in our portfolio, like maybe it's gene therapy. So we would be, actively looking. But also we have several RFPs that we do, and we have a lot of incoming requests. You can imagine in this down market, all the demand. And what I would say about our model is, while we do want the returns that VCs get, we don't have limited partners. And we focus, the most important thing for us is the science, and we hope to make a good return, but we're not so much focused on the returns as we are on the science. And so in this difficult market, we've been able to fund companies that have trouble finding money anywhere else. And what we found is that our scientific diligence is so admired at ADDF that often we're like the stamp of approval that enables these companies to get future funding. And a lot of the time, people will say, well, can we sign your contract early, because the next venture partner won't come in until you've actually signed. So we see a lot of that.
Yeah, that's interesting. What does the scientific validation component look like? You have like a board?
Yeah, so we have, I'm going to get the number wrong, but I think it's like we have like 19 PhD scientists on board. And so the first investigation is an internal one.
Mhm.
And then if we like an idea and we think it will fit well in our portfolio, then we have outside reviewers review it. And these are prominent people in the Alzheimer's field. And then after that, it goes to our scientific investment committee, who study the idea and vote to approve or not to approve. So that is our scientific method. And obviously over the years, we've developed such an expertise in Alzheimer's specifically that, I think a lot of the VCs really admire that knowledge.
Yeah. As far as scientific analysis of potential partners goes, have you noticed any trends, or do you have any preferences in terms of, you mentioned gene therapy, for instance,
Mhm.
like, is small molecule more attractive than a
Mhm.
biologic, more attractive than a gene therapy? Like any trends there, or are you pretty agnostic?
I think we are pretty agnostic. It's sort of this, we think there are going to be a lot of targets, and we like to have a good range of things. A couple of companies, for example, like we invest in Lexeo Therapeutics, which happens to have just presented at the JP Morgan conference. And they're a genetic medicine company, a clinical stage genetic medicine. So that's one company that we invested in early in 2014, where we actually invested when the idea was at Weill Cornell University.
Mhm.
And then it somehow became a company, Lexeo, or Lexeo bought it. I don't know how. And then it just went public. So we made another investment in 2020, and now it's gone public. So that's one company, and it's very rewarding to us when we identify something in 2014 and then it becomes part of a public company. So that's
Sure.
very interesting for us. We have one company that does a monoclonal antibody for inflammatory fibrin, which is supposed to be bad for neurons in cognitive decline. So that's another company we invested in 2019 and now again in 2023. And they are doing their Series A right now and are trying to fund a phase 2 study.
Yeah, that's great. You talked a little bit about how ADDF support is seen as a sought after sort of stamp of approval. Do you look for? You might have touched on this, but I'm curious about how it's maybe changed in the recent the financial climate. Do you look for companies that have, like, your reputation is often determined by the company you keep, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you look for companies that have specific business development support from specific firms or even pharma companies?
Well, we typically would invest before the pharma companies would come in, and we're really trying to get these companies ready for pharma.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I wouldn't say so much. I wouldn't really say that so much. I think we're investing 100% based on what we think is the validity of the science.
Yeah. All right. Once you validated the science and you strike up a partnership, is it pretty maybe not monetarily, but is it pretty cookie cutter? Like, is it pretty automated?
Yeah. So once the science is validated, then it comes to we negotiate the deal, and then it comes to our investment committee. So then we do have an investment committee that has to approve the terms of the deal. And they're really the ones who want to see that we're getting, quote, venture-like returns, and that we've actually structured and negotiated a good deal. Mm-hmm. And it's actually not cookie cutter, because ADDF, we don't invest directly. Well, we do. We buy preferred stock, but that money that we give a company has to go to a specific project with the budget and a work plan. And so we're in very close touch helping the companies design the projects and design the clinical trials, and we help them with IP and with business plans. So we're having a very close relationship even before we approve the proposal. And then once it's approved and once they start working, doing the work, we stay in touch with them very closely to see how it's going and how we can set them up for success. And even after, we've done a lot of follow-on deals this year.
Mhm.
And we tend to like to do that and to really help our companies prosper.
That's cool. What is the sort of the, I don't know, day-to-day, not necessarily day-to-day, but that sort of relationship management aspect? Are there like customer relationship managers at ADDF that work with these folks, or is it?
We're a nonprofit. No, it's really the science team that work with them. I work with them if there are any finance related issues or anything related to the structure of the deal. Do they need an extension on their convertible note? Those kind of things. But the scientists are really working with them on a day-to-day basis. So with regards to how the project is going.